Toxic people are like smoke in a small room, suffocating, invisible at times, and harmful over the long term. They invade our space, distort our peace, and challenge our emotional balance. Most of us know one or more such people. Those who drain our energy, criticize us subtly or directly, sow seeds of doubt, or manipulate our kindness for their own gain. What if you could not only spot them instantly, but also make yourself immune to their poison? This talk is not about confrontation, cutting people off impulsively, or becoming cold-hearted. It's about mastery over self, such that their toxicity has no space to attach itself to you. The moment you recognize that toxic people don't just hurt you because they are toxic, but because there is something in you that still responds to it, you begin to gain power. The key lies not in fighting them, but in strengthening the part of yourself that they can't touch. Imagine a glass of clear water. When mud is thrown into it, it gets murky. But what if that same water is flowing constantly, pure and untouched by anything temporary? That's your mind, that's your spirit. And it can be trained. Let me share the most powerful shift you can make to ensure toxic people stop bothering you. Not because they've changed, but because you have transformed. When someone throws shade at you, it's your choice whether to stand in it or walk through it. That is the most engaging realization in this journey. The real battlefield is within. It's not about armor, it's about transparency. When nothing sticks, nothing stays. You become unbotherable. Toxic people feed off reactions. Every time you get angry, anxious, offended, or frustrated, you hand them power, and often you don't even realize it because these reactions feel automatic. But here's a truth that will set you free. Automatic does not mean unchangeable. You are not a slave to your emotions. You are the observer, the witness, and the master. And when you realize that, toxic people begin to lose their grip, not because they've stopped, but because you have stopped responding the way they expect. So how do you reclaim this control? Start with stillness, not silence, not suppression, stillness. The ability to hold your mind like a calm lake, where even if someone throws a rock, the ripples settle quickly. When your mind is still, you no longer react impulsively, you respond intentionally. Next, learn to detach without disconnecting. You don't need to storm out of people's lives to protect your peace. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what isn't yours. Toxic people often project their own inner chaos onto you. When you stop absorbing it, you return it to sender. No anger, just clarity. Finally, look inward. What are your triggers? What part of you is still seeking validation, approval, or justice? That's where they get in. The more aware you become of your wounds, the harder it is for others to weaponize them. Heal those spots and you become whole. When you are whole, you are no longer hurt by fragments of others. You don't fight darkness by cursing it. You light a candle, and the brightest candle you can light is awareness. The more you know yourself, the less others can control you. So next time a toxic person tries to pull you into their storm, remember, you are not obligated to dance in their chaos. You are the sky, not the storm. Let them rage, let them shout, but remain still. Stillness is not weakness. It is ultimate strength. It says, I see you, but I do not need to react to you. I feel your energy, but I am not moved by it. I remain in myself, unshaken. And that is how they stop bothering you, not because they've stopped trying, but because they fail, every single time. From now on, your peace is not negotiable, your mind is not a playground, your energy is not for rent. And toxic people, they will walk away, not because you pushed them, but because your silence made them realize they have no power here. You've become untouchable. Not by becoming someone else, but by finally becoming yourself. In a world saturated with noise, urgency, and constant stimulation, inner stillness is not just a luxury, it's a necessity, especially when dealing with toxic individuals who thrive on emotional reactions. The ability to remain internally undisturbed becomes your greatest shield. But inner stillness is often misunderstood. People assume it means suppression, avoidance, or disengagement. In reality, it is none of those things. Inner stillness is a conscious decision to not allow the chaos outside to become chaos inside. It is the practiced art of holding your emotional and mental space in such a way that nothing foreign, no matter how provocative, can settle in it without your permission. Toxic people often operate like emotional pickpockets. They know exactly which emotional buttons to press because most of us are wearing our insecurities, our fears, and our egos on our sleeves. They look for a reaction, a twitch of frustration, a slight defensiveness, a shift in your energy that tells them they've got in. But what happens when there is no reaction, when your inner waters remain calm, regardless of what is thrown into them? They lose interest. More than that, they lose access. Stillness is the gateway to invulnerability. Stillness doesn't mean you're not thinking or feeling. It means you are in control of the quality of your thoughts and emotions. When you master stillness, you create a space between stimulus and response. In that space lies your freedom. Instead of reacting impulsively to someone's manipulation, insult, or passive-aggressive jab, you take a breath, sometimes mentally, sometimes physically, and choose whether or not it's even worth a response. More often than not, it isn't, and even when it is, the response will come from a place of clarity rather than defensiveness. Learning to be still requires practice because the world trains us to be reactive. From childhood, we're conditioned to defend ourselves, prove ourselves, and retaliate when attacked. But this is the behavior of someone whose peace is conditional. The goal is to make your peace unconditional. That means it doesn't rely on people agreeing with you, validating you, or even treating you kindly. It means you've built a foundation so deep inside yourself that no one's words can shake it unless you let them. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, not because you enjoy conflict, but because you are no longer afraid of it. You watch the wind blow, the rain lash, the trees bend, but you are rooted. You are observing, aware, and entirely undisturbed. This is the power of stillness, not the absence of chaos, but the presence of calm in the face of it, and this calm cannot be faked. It is not about putting on a stoic mask while your insides churn. It's about going inward and tending to your emotional responses so regularly that they no longer surge uncontrolled. You begin to recognize the early signs of reactivity, the shallow breath, the rising heat, the clenching jaw, and instead of being pulled along by them, you sit with them. You name them, you allow them to pass. One of the simplest yet most profound practices to cultivate stillness is mindful observation. The next time someone says something designed to provoke you, pause. Listen, but do not absorb. Imagine their words as arrows passing through smoke. There's nothing solid in you for the arrow to pierce. You hear it, but you don't hold it. That pause, that breath is where stillness lives. Over time, this pause becomes longer, deeper, more instinctive. Eventually, it becomes your default state. You'll find that people will begin to notice something different about you. Toxic individuals especially will sense that their usual tactics don't work anymore. They'll try harder for a while. This is common. When people lose access to your emotional responses, they may escalate, becoming more dramatic, more accusatory, more invasive. But this is simply the final stage of their influence. Don't mistake increased noise for increased power. In fact, it's the opposite. It's their last attempt to get a reaction out of you, and your stillness is what confirms their loss of control. Some may interpret your stillness as coldness or arrogance. Let them. You are not here to manage other people's interpretations. You are here to guard your inner sanctuary. The more you anchor into stillness, the less inclined you'll be to explain or defend yourself. You realize that not every battle is worth fighting, and not every insult needs an answer. Silence at times becomes the loudest response. Stillness also teaches you that emotions are temporary, that anger you feel when someone disrespects you. It's a visitor, not a resident, that urge to retaliate, a passing impulse, not a necessity. When you stop identifying with your emotions, when you realize they are experiences you are having, not who you are, you gain separation from them. And in that separation, stillness blooms. There is a profound kind of confidence that comes with this stillness. It's not the loud, performative kind. It's quiet, rooted, and unmistakable. you walk differently. You speak with fewer words but greater weight. You stop needing to win arguments because your peace isn't up for auction. And toxic people, they sense it. They don't just sense it. They feel excluded from your inner world, and that is the ultimate boundary. One of the deepest truths about toxic dynamics is this: it takes two. Even if one person is overtly toxic, the relationship survives because the other person is still reacting. They're still emotionally available for the game. When you exit that game, not physically but energetically, you disarm the entire dynamic. You don't engage, you don't defend, you don't chase understanding from people committed to misunderstanding you. You rise, not as a protest, but as a natural evolution of your self-awareness. And it doesn't mean you never feel hurt, or frustration, or even betrayal. Those feelings will still visit, because you are human. But they will not dwell, they will not dictate. You will feel them, learn from them, and release them. And in that process, you become the kind of person who walks through fire without being burned, because you no longer carry the kindling. Stillness is not the end goal, it is the foundation. Everything you build from it, your boundaries, your relationships, your purpose, becomes stronger, more aligned, and more unshakable. You stop living on emotional autopilot and begin to move with deep intention. And the best part, you do this not to impress others, not to appear wise, not even to win against toxic people. You do it for yourself, because your peace is sacred, and because you've finally understood that the world doesn't need to become less chaotic for you to become more centered. To truly protect your peace in a world full of noise and negativity, especially from toxic people, you must learn one of life's most subtle and powerful arts: the ability to emotionally detach without needing to physically disconnect. Most people assume that the only way to protect themselves from toxic individuals is by cutting them off, disappearing, or putting up thick walls. But life doesn't always offer us the luxury of distance. Sometimes those toxic people are coworkers, family members, or people you have to interact with regularly. This is where emotional detachment becomes not just a tool, but a form of quiet wisdom. Detachment is often misunderstood. People think it means becoming cold, indifferent, or heartless, but true detachment isn't about withdrawing your humanity. It's about reclaiming your autonomy. It's the space between your soul and the storm outside. It allows you to show up fully in the world, aware, compassionate, responsive, but without being ruled by what others think, say, or project onto you. It is not indifference, it is balance. When you're emotionally entangled with someone toxic, your inner state becomes dependent on their behavior. If they're kind, you feel relief. If they're cruel, you spiral into confusion or hurt. And because toxic people are inconsistent by nature, this creates a cycle of emotional instability in you. It's like living on a seesaw, or never knowing when the floor will fall from under you. Detachment breaks that cycle. It teaches you to stand firmly on your own ground, no longer swayed by their moods, manipulations, or approval. Imagine being in the same room with someone who's trying to provoke you using sarcasm, subtle digs, or guilt trips. In the past, you might have taken the bait. You might have tried to explain yourself, defend your intentions, or even retaliate with equal negativity. But now, you understand the power of not giving them what they seek. You no longer feel the need to be understood by someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. You don't pull away, you stay present, but emotionally, you are anchored elsewhere. Your self, worth, your validation, your peace, they don't live in their hands anymore. This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. In fact, detachment begins with honesty. You acknowledge the hurt, you observe your emotional reactions, you feel them fully, but you don't act from them. You create space between the feeling and the action. That space is where freedom is born, and that space is something you build moment by moment with awareness and patience. One of the most liberating realizations is this: you are allowed to be fully present with someone without being emotionally invested in their opinion of you. Their disapproval, their sarcasm, their silent treatments, they no longer hold weight because you no longer see them as reflections of your worth. You see them for what they are, projections, And when you detach, you stop trying to manage their projections. You let them have their thoughts while you hold onto your peace. This is especially crucial in relationships where walking away isn't an immediate option. In those cases, your inner posture becomes your defense. You may still attend the family gathering, show up at work, or speak with the neighbor, but now you interact from a place of quiet clarity. You speak with kindness, but you do not cater to manipulation. You listen with presence, but you do not internalize toxicity. You do not argue for your value, you simply embody it. Some might say, but if I don't fight back, won't they think they've won? The truth is, when you stop participating in their emotional games, they haven't won, they've lost access. Toxic people crave reaction more than resolution. They need your emotional availability to feel powerful. When you detach, you cut off their supply, not with cruelty, but with quiet discipline. They might escalate at first, trying harder to provoke you, but over time, they begin to realize something fundamental has changed. You are no longer available for chaos. Detachment is not the same as disconnection. You can care about people deeply and still refuse to let them poison your inner world. In fact, detachment often allows you to care more genuinely, because your care is no longer laced with resentment or the need to control. You begin to love with boundaries, not expectations. You speak honestly, not to change them, but to honor yourself. And if they walk away from you because they can no longer manipulate you, then let them walk. Your peace is not worth sacrificing for proximity. One of the greatest strengths of emotional detachment is that it makes you less reactive and more responsive. You become harder to manipulate, not because you've become hardened, but because you've become wise. You begin to notice patterns you once ignored. You see the loop forming before you fall into it. You recognize guilt, trips as they're happening, and you politely step aside. You start to identify when a conversation is no longer about resolution, but about control. And you disengage, not out of weakness, but from a place of inner power. The deeper your detachment, the more you start living on your own terms. You stop being so available to chaos. You stop explaining your decisions to people who will never understand your growth. You stop attending every emotional argument you're invited to. And suddenly, life becomes lighter. Not because the toxic people disappeared, but because they no longer take up space in your emotional body. And here's something else. Detachment does not mean you never speak up or set boundaries. On the contrary, it gives you the clarity to do so without anger or desperation. You start to say no without guilt, that doesn't work for me, without apology, and I'm not available for this kind of energy, without feeling rude. You become clear, direct, and firm, but always calm. And calmness in a chaotic environment is a superpower. As you grow in this practice, you begin to notice your triggers shrinking. The things that used to send you into spirals of anxiety or overthinking begin to feel distant, almost foreign. You look back and realize that many of your old reactions weren't really about the other person. They were about the parts of you that were still unhealed. Detachment helps you heal those parts, not by pushing people away, but by turning inward and asking, why does this affect me so deeply? And in that question lies your healing. You don't need to burn bridges to protect your peace. You don't need to ghost or disappear unless that's what is truly needed. Often, the most powerful shift happens not in cutting others off, but in cutting the emotional cord that keeps you bound to their approval or drama. That's where true freedom lies. So you stay, you observe. You breathe, you speak only when necessary. You let go of the need to fix, to explain, to defend. You remain kind but unshakable, connected but not entangled, present but no longer prey. And one day, without realizing it, you will look around and see that the same toxic people who used to drain you now pass through your life like shadows, unnoticed, unaffected, and uninvited into your peace. Not because you've become someone else, but because you've finally learned how to remain yourself, no matter what room you walk into. Toxic people only have power over you if they can find something inside you to pull, twist, or press against. Their ability to disturb your peace is not rooted in their words or actions alone, but in how those words or actions awaken unresolved parts within you, emotional wounds, insecurities, or memories that still have influence over your present. What they do is poke your triggers, and to become truly untouchable, you must do the deep, honest work of recognizing and neutralizing those triggers from the inside out. A trigger is not just something that annoys you. It is something that activates a disproportionate emotional response, something that feels sharp, fast, and often irrational. It's the wave of anger from a simple comment. It's the drop in your chest when someone ignores you. It's the tightness in your throat when you're misunderstood or criticized. Triggers reveal where your emotional history is still writing your current story, and they are gold if you're willing to examine them without judgment. Toxic people, whether they know it or not, are often experts at detecting where you're most vulnerable. They know how to say just the right thing to make you feel invisible, unworthy, guilty, ashamed, or confused. But here's the truth that changes everything. They can only trigger what is already there. If someone says something cruel, and there's nothing inside you that believes it might be true, it won't land. It won't stick. It passes over you like smoke. But if some part of you has been conditioned to believe you are not good enough, not smart enough, not lovable, then those words can feel like daggers. This is why the work begins inside. It's not about getting better at avoiding toxic people. It's about getting better at seeing where they hook into you, and cutting those hooks loose one by one. You begin by paying close attention to your reactions. The next time someone provokes you, instead of responding immediately, pause. Ask yourself, what am I really feeling right now? Not just I'm angry, but why? Is it because you felt disrespected, rejected, ignored, or powerless? What does that feeling remind you of? When in your life have you felt this before? This is not overthinking. This is uncovering. And what you will begin to find is that most triggers are echoes. They are not new wounds. They are old ones being reopened. For example, if someone belittles you in a group setting and your heart races, your face flushes, and your mind goes blank, that reaction didn't start with that person. It started long ago, maybe when your voice wasn't heard in your own family, or when you were laughed at for expressing yourself in school. The current moment has merely reactivated something that was already living quietly inside you. When you recognize that, you can begin to disarm it. You are no longer at the mercy of someone else's behavior. You are engaged in the healing of your own emotional landscape. Neutralizing a trigger doesn't mean it disappears forever overnight. It means you become conscious of it, you name it, and in naming it, you begin to soften its grip. When you know where a reaction comes from, you can meet it with compassion instead of shame. You don't attack yourself for being triggered. You hold space for that part of you that still needs understanding. You become your own safe place, so you don't look for that safety in people who exploit it. One powerful practice is writing down your triggers after emotional experiences. Not in the heat of the moment, but after you've had space to breathe. Note what happened, what you felt, and what it reminded you of. Then ask, what did I believe in that moment? Was it the belief that I'm not good enough? That I always mess things up? That I'll never be truly accepted? These beliefs, often buried and unspoken, are what make you react so strongly, and these beliefs can be restructured. When you begin to challenge your old beliefs, you weaken the grip of those who benefit from them. Toxic people love to play on your guilt, shame, and fear, but when you've worked through your guilt, released your shame, and faced your fear, they have nothing left to use. What was once a vulnerable spot becomes a place of clarity. And clarity is a weapon in a world that profits from confusion. You'll find that as you neutralize your triggers, your responses to provocation change dramatically. Someone may insult you, and instead of reacting, you observe. You hear the words, but they feel foreign, no longer aligned with who you are. You see that their behavior is about them, not about you. You recognize that your emotional energy is too valuable to be spent on people who thrive on draining it. Neutralizing triggers also makes your boundaries stronger, not because you've become rigid, but because you now recognize what is and isn't yours to carry. When someone accuses you unfairly or tries to make you feel guilty for doing what's right for you, you don't collapse. You don't over-explain, you simply stand firm with quiet assurance, knowing that your worth is not up for debate. This kind of confidence is not performative, it's cellular, it lives deep in your bones. Another layer of this work involves recognizing when you are triggering others, and how their reactions are often not about you either. This doesn't excuse toxic behavior, but it helps you step out of the personalization trap. When someone lashes out, manipulates, or tries to shame you, you can say to yourself, "This is their wound speaking." That simple awareness allows you to maintain your own integrity without becoming reactive. Of course, this level of self-awareness isn't always easy. It takes time, reflection, and a willingness to be honest with yourself. It requires that you stop blaming others for how you feel and start taking responsibility for what still lives unresolved within you. That's the hardest part, but it's also the most empowering, because once you see that your triggers are yours to heal, you no longer walk through life afraid of what others might say or do. You become emotionally agile. Someone's opinion may sting, but it doesn't scar. A rejection may hurt, but it doesn't define. You are no longer dominated by your emotional past. In this state, toxic people begin to lose their relevance. Not because they've changed, but because you have. They no longer seem threatening. Their chaos no longer feels contagious. And over time, you find yourself less and less drawn into emotional conflict, not because you're avoiding life, but because you've become deeply rooted in yourself. When your inner world is no longer held hostage by old wounds and unexamined beliefs, you become untriggerable, not in the sense that nothing ever affects you, but in the sense that you are no longer held captive by your reactions. You respond, you reflect, and sometimes you walk away, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. And that is the ultimate victory over toxicity, not silence, not escape, but full conscious presence. Without the pain, without the hook, without the weight. You move through life as your own center, no longer orbiting the storms of others, and the storms still come, but they no longer define your scale.